muito bom dia a todos. Muito prazer em estar aqui com vocês e espero que este painel, que foi sensivelmente reduzido devido ao atraso, enfim, dos trabalhos, mas vamos tentar ganhar o máximo de tempo indo muito diretos às questões e não nos perdendo em elucubrações, digamos assim. É neste sentido que eu agradeço, aliás, Paulo, a intervenção que teve ao colocar a questão de um ponto de vista geoestratégico e geopolítico. E nesse sentido, eu gostaria de interpelar o Sr. Benedict Orama, presidente do EurAfrican Bank, na medida em que foi muito reconfortante ouvir as previsões económicas citadas aqui por Paulo Portas, de que, de um ponto de vista futuro, a África é um país, a África e o Brasil são as duas áreas, enfim, um continente e um país à dimensão de um continente quase, que têm uma previsão económica favorável. Todavia, o estado de hoje, o estado da arte de hoje, em relação à situação do continente africano, não é tão auspiciosa. Existe neste momento a pressão combinada da inflação, do aumento da dívida, da escassez de bens, do encarecimento dos bens. Diga-me, como é que a África, e de um ponto de vista de políticas económicas e financeiras, pode sair-se agora deste momento difícil em que vivemos?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator, for the opportunity. And let me also take this opportunity to thank the organizers of the EurAfrican Forum, the Portuguese Diaspora Council, and the government of this beautiful city, Cascais, for the opportunity to be here. Let me also say that I was inspired by the speeches we received today. The foreign minister was very knowledgeable. I was actually surprised with the details of his knowledge about what is going on in the continent. And then I was really inspired by the strategic insights in what His Excellency Portas presented today. What I would say to the question you asked is, since I was born as a child, I've always heard that Africa had the greatest potential. Every time Africa had greatest potential. I became an adult, so I'm asking, when will that potential become a reality? When do we go from potential to realizing the potential? Otherwise, the potential becomes a broken record. It's no longer any potential. And I agree fully that the continent is making a headway. However, what is happening now provides that opportunity to move Africa from potential to beginning to contribute to the world. And part of it is actually as a result of the crisis we see today. Two of these big crises, the COVID-19 crisis and Ukraine crisis, revealed more than anything the vulnerabilities of the continent. When the COVID-19 crisis broke, it became obvious immediately that Africa could not even produce basic things, basic face masks we didn't have. And I can tell you this because I'm a member of the Africa Vaccine Acquisition Task Team. I'm the chairman of the African Union COVID-19 Response Fund. We didn't have test kits. We didn't have anything. We had to go and beg. And we had the money. EurAfrican Bank put out billions of dollars are board approved. Ultimately, we disbursed more than $7 billion. But we had to go and get the chairperson of the AU at that time, President Ramaphosa, to beg the president of China to make available to us personal protective equipment, test kits, hand sanitizers, basic things of that nature. Then Ukraine came. All of a sudden, we found again, we couldn't see the fertilizers to produce food with. No people we found were so dependent on Ukraine and Russia for the food we eat, the grains. And of course, the certain kind of refined fuel, because it's not just producing commodities that matter. We produce a lot of oil, but we also import refined petroleum products. But along the coast, along that western coast, from around Mauritania all the way down, the fuel they need contains naphtha. And the naphtha is supplied by Russia only. So it all became a complex thing. So while all these things have shown the vulnerabilities, something has also happened in a positive way. In 2018, for the first time ever, Africans rose to a challenge and signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Yeah. And in record time, in less than a year, it achieved requisite ratifications and became effective. Nobody ever knew that that was going to be possible. And even during the height of COVID-19, the negotiations of the protocols did not stop. Yeah. That is why today we've literally finished negotiating the rules of origin. There have been exchange of tariff offers. They've almost been completed so that meaningful trading can start. We also, as a continent, we've come together to begin to deal with those things that will make that trade agreement work. I think, I don't know whether it was Potters or the foreign minister that said it. We needed to have the instrument. And EurAfrican Bank has introduced the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. We have 42 currencies on the continent. The effect of this, and you knew it in Europe, was to divert trade. It cost Africa about $5 billion to make intra-regional payments. Mm-hmm. Because every payment has to go out to Europe or to America before it comes back to Africa. It takes about 10 days sometimes to make a payment just across borders. So what we've done now with the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is to allow those payments to be made in national currencies. So if somebody in country A wants to buy something from country B, that transaction will be consummated in national currencies. And EurAfrican Bank will do the clearing. So that also now has been introduced and is becoming operational. So these are some of the things that are happening, including now the determination now for the continent to return to food production in a meaningful way. Food production, we were not eating wheat before. Wheat was introduced. It wasn't the staple food of Africa. But we've taken that habit. But the idea now is that that food production must be increased. We are in a situation in Africa today where, in fact, Africa produces more fertilizer than it consumes. But because of the fragmentation of Africa, many countries depend on fertilizers imported. And most of those imports come from the Black Sea area. Whereas we produce more than we need. Nigeria produces a lot of urea. Egypt produces a lot of urea, about 6 million tons per annum, almost the same with Egypt. The Moroccans produce phosphate. Togo produces phosphate. And of course, there are a few fertilizers that may be the mixtures that we probably need to import some other ingredients to mix them and get what you need. But because we didn't have a way of knowing what is going on within the continent, we had a situation where we had abundance, but we also had scarcity. So all these we are dealing with. We've now created an Africa Trade Exchange, a platform where we put all the products, all the producers in Africa have to put up their products there, and countries go there to make the order. And the Afrexim Bank has put up a $4 billion facility to do the trade finance to support trade under that platform. So we believe things will change. So I agree with you that the future looks bright, this time for real, not just for potential.
É verdade. Muito obrigada pela sua intervenção. Aliás, gostaria de pegar nas suas palavras, digamos assim, para questionar Viviane. Desculpem, isto aqui atrapalha-me. Viviane Onano, que é uma empresária do setor social. E... Oh, sorry. É verdade. Ok. Viviane Onano, como viram na sua biografia...
No.
There's no translation.
Está tudo bem. Tá?
Okay. Just get back.
Ok. Então, Viviane Onano é, como viram na sua biografia, uma empresária ou uma empreendedora social. Ou seja, ela trabalha com pessoas. E incrementar a sua capacidade de agir na sociedade e de serem autónomos. Neste sentido, nós estivemos a falar até agora de temas muito vastos e importantes, como a geoestratégica, a geoeconomia, a geopolítica, e o Sr. Benedicto Oramã falou, aliás, das questões que se põem hoje ao continente africano e como a pandemia e a guerra mostraram as suas vulnerabilidades. Falou que na África, quando começou a pandemia, faltavam máscaras, e faltava gás, álcool gel, e apesar da produção e com a guerra, apesar da produção interna do continente africano, faltam fertilizantes, porque apesar da sua produção ser maior do que a que consome, dependem dos fertilizantes importados que neste momento estão muito dificultados. Ou seja, os fertilizantes são precisos para a agricultura. Quem faz a agricultura são as pessoas. Quem usa a máscara são as pessoas. Neste sentido, Viviane, tudo isto, estamos a falar de pessoas. Quando estamos a falar dos problemas do mundo, estamos a falar de pessoas. Neste sentido, gostava de lhe perguntar qual é o seu ponto de vista neste setor, neste campo muito mais vasto, muito mais amplo. Voltemos ao básico, ou seja, às pessoas.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I need to feel the energy in the room. I'm super excited to be here, to be participating at this edition of the EurAfrica Forum, and also to share a panel with somebody that I have so much respect and has been very supportive on my journey, Professor Oramã. So I'm really delighted to be here. Going back to your question, Louisa, so there's been a lot of conversations, a lot of statistics have been thrown around. But as Lisa said, we're talking about people. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about you and I. These economies are run by people. These economies are run by human beings. And unless we harness the potential of the human beings that we're talking about, then the economies and all these other great visions that we have for both continents cannot really be achieved. And as Professor Oramã said, we don't want to talk about the potential, but we actually want to harness that potential in actualization. So looking back at the ramifications of COVID-19 pandemic, and now with the Ukraine-Russia war, I've seen direct impact in the lives of women and youth on the continent. When COVID struck, majority of the women and youth are in the informal sector on the continent. And when there were lockdowns, they were the first people to lose their jobs because majority of them didn't have their jobs digitalized, so they couldn't continue to reach their consumers and be able to earn a living. And also when you look at the education sector, when the pandemic struck, everybody has to go online. But if you look at the rural communities and the marginalized communities, even the teachers did not know how to use these technologies, and they were learning at the same time trying to teach the students. So as Professor Rama said, the COVID-19 pandemic really explicitly showed the inequalities that we've been living with in our communities. A good divide between the haves and the have-nots, and how, in that essence, our communities are really divided. So for me, going back to the conversation that we are having right now, geopolitics and whatnot, it's all about investing in people. And for me, the future of the African continent is in the women and the youth. So we've seen majority of young people losing their lives trying to cross the Mediterranean to seek better opportunities in Europe. But we can create those opportunities for them on the continent if both continents work together to make sure that young people have access to quality and quality education and the skills training needed by the labor markets. And we've also made sure that our entrepreneurs continue to have access to easy capital finance, but also the training. So bridging the gap between the big businesses and the small businesses. Digitalization is going to be very important moving forward. Technology is the new currency. But how do you make sure that the technology that's being brought to the continent is what the continent needs? It's not about copy-pasting technology from Europe to Africa and expecting it to work the same way. So it's about understanding the issues on the ground. What are the people grappling with? We have very smart people on the continent. How do you make sure that they can actually fully use the technology that's coming on the continent to be able to impact their lives, but also to change the lives of the people around them? And then, most of the time, when you talk about the EurAfrica partnership, we're more centered on the governmental level. But that doesn't really trickle to the people. So how do we reach the women entrepreneurs, the women in the informal sector? How do you make sure that they have the right kind of training? How do you ensure that they have access to the capital that they need to thrive? How do you ensure that we have policies that protect them when they're doing businesses and they're trying to thrive in the societies that they come from? So for me, those are the kind of investments that we need. Strengthening our healthcare systems. I mean, we saw that with the Ebola outbreak a couple of years back, and then now with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we need to strengthen our healthcare systems moving forward because we never know. A year, 2 years from now, another pandemic may arise. So how strong are our healthcare systems? So those are the kind of investments that I think we need to put in place if you're to ensure that we actually realize and harness the potential between Europe and Africa, but also make sure that trickles down to the marginalized communities on the ground. Because as we said, these economies are only built by people. And if it doesn't trickle down, then whatever GDP and growth numbers that we talk about really doesn't make sense.
Mas diga-me uma coisa então, desculpe, Viviane, tudo o que disse é muitíssimo importante em termos de como deve ser. Agora, como é que isso se consegue? Portanto, muitos governos e Estados africanos vivem com dificuldades, e alguns deles, autocráticos, corruptos, etc. Não vamos aqui estar a desfiar os problemas africanos que conhecemos. Como é que isso se transforma em realidade? Como é que se dá o empowerment ao povo que necessita da educação, da saúde, etc.? É preciso mudanças mais globais, mudanças políticas?
Political global changes? I mean, I think the challenges that, sorry, if I got your question right, you talk about the challenges that African governments face, right? I don't think those challenges are only,
Exato.
they are not only, what is it called? They're not only challenges that African governments face, okay? There are also challenges that we see with governments here in Europe. There's been a lot of social unrest because of how shrinking the democratic spaces are, and majority of the people feel like they're not, their issues are not being addressed, the economy is not as inclusive as it's supposed to be. So I don't think, based on your question, the issues that you're talking about African governments are only about African governments. But that said, I think with the COVID-19 and the Ukraine war, we've seen our governments coming together, to try and figure out solutions to our problems, right? And Professor Rama spoke about when COVID-19 struck, and then they had to come together, and President Ramaphosa had to actually go and speak on the behalf of the continent for us to be able to have test kits and be able to have masks. So I think that rather than looking at it, that Africa has tensions and whatnot within our governments, which is something that it's not new to Africa, and it's not only Africa that's struggling, it's a global crisis that we all have with different nations struggling to keep stability within their countries. So for me, it takes me back again, what I've talked about, the empowerment is for the people, right? And for me, it starts with investment in education, economic empowerment of women and youth, for them to realize and harness their full potential, digitalization, because that's the future, but also a just energy transition for the continent. Right now, I'm seeing the new scramble for Africa, and people realizing the potential that's there, and now that, because the Ukraine-Russia war, realizing that Africa has potential, and we need to start rethinking how we engage with them. And it should not just be because we need the gas, we need gas from the continent, so the continent is important. But it should be a relationship that's continuous, that's based on mutual respect, that's based on respecting diverse opinion, and also realizing that Africa is a continent of 54 nations, right? And each nation is different from the other. And as much as we say we border one another, the infrastructure is still not there. The transport infrastructure that's needed is still not there, right? So we need to really go to the nuances rather than really speaking broad and trying to generalize the issues of Africa, and looking at each country brings their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Each country has their strong, they have their political unrest and the political stability. Each country has their own economic strengths and economic weaknesses. But just generalizing Africa as a continent of 54 countries and expecting what's happening in Kenya to be working in Mozambique and working in South Africa and Cape Verde, I think is not really the best way to address and tackle the issues that are happening on the continent, in my opinion.
Ok. Paulo Portas, há uma guerra na Europa, há uma guerra na Ucrânia, mas todavia neste momento a África também parece uma espécie de battlefield de uma outra guerra. Ou seja, a África é um continente cobiçado. Nós vemos o que fez agora, nesta semana, a visita do Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros russo, a visita do próprio Presidente Macron a vários países da Europa Central e Ocidental, e também o enviado especial de Washington. A Rússia e a China cobiçam a África, e o Ocidente também. Digamos assim, apesar da Europa é o maior parceiro comercial, mas a Rússia é o maior vendedor de armas à África. Paulo, como é que vê a África, que sendo um continente tão rico e promissor, se está a transformar também num campo de batalha de outros interesses?
Uma das consequências da guerra na Ucrânia, provocada pela invasão da Rússia, foi uma espécie de ressurgimento é injusto chamar assim, é uma simplificação, mas de ressurgimento dos países não alinhados. Ou seja, há países que não fazem uma equivalência entre agressor e agredido, mas não querem ter que escolher, nomeadamente quando a escolha é feita entre americanos e chineses. No caso africano, é preciso perceber que uma parte das Forças Armadas dos Estados africanos têm equipamento que vem da era soviética e que depois tem a sua manutenção feita por material e pessoal e quadros russos. E, portanto, para muitos países africanos que têm como forma de cooperação mais acentuada com a Rússia a defesa, é difícil estar a fazer escolhas nas Nações Unidas ou no Conselho de Direitos Humanos que envolvam a Rússia como parte militar. A mesma coisa, aliás, as pessoas não se dão conta. A Índia não sabe, se o problema fosse a China, a Índia estaria certamente do lado dos Estados Unidos. Sendo a Rússia, não pode estar, porque 60% do material militar, do equipamento militar da Índia é de fabrico e origem soviética ou russa, e não podem ficar com as Forças Armadas inutilizadas. A política externa não é uma matéria de utopia, é o desenvolvimento do progresso por passos possíveis. E, portanto, este é só explicar, dar esta vertente. E depois há muitos países, enquanto a Rússia não tem um especial problema com o seu isolamento, a China não quer estar isolada do mundo, com certeza. A China é o primeiro parceiro de mais de 100 países. Mais de 100 países têm como exportador, somando tudo, exportações e importações, têm como primeiro cliente ou fornecedor a China. Portanto, a ideia de fragmentar a globalização é uma ideia muito perigosa, porque a Ásia representa 47% do crescimento do mundo. E a China representa 20%. Sozinha. Portanto, a ideia de que nós, de repente, por obediência às lealdades políticas, renunciamos às oportunidades de metade da economia global, é uma coisa que nos prejudica, não temos vantagem nenhuma nisso. A África tem. Além disso, repare uma coisa, eu costumo dizer, por ironia, a Europa em matéria energética está confrontada não com a opção entre o principal e o acessório, isso todos sabemos o que é, mas com a opção entre o essencial e o urgente. E isso é que é uma grande complicação, porque o essencial é fazer a transição energética, o urgente é ter gás no próximo inverno. É tão simples quanto isto. E mais uma vez aqui a utopia não faz nada, não tem lugar aqui. É muito difícil meter a utopia neste quarto. É muito difícil. Daqui a 2 meses, há uma parte dos países europeus que não sabe se tem abastecimento de energia. E isso obriga a rever, não obriga a rever os objetivos essenciais. Todos nós sabemos que a prazo, e o prazo tinha que ser o mais curto possível, dentro do possível, aquilo que nos garante maior independência é a produção de energias limpas, que não seja dependente da importação de 1 ou 2 fornecedores principais, nomeadamente a Rússia, e podem ser produzidas aqui, como podem ser produzidas em África. A África tem condições. As pessoas olham para a África como gás, petróleo. Por amor de Deus, a África tem capacidades. Por exemplo, eu dei apenas o solar, o segundo maior investimento do mundo em solar é em Marrocos. A África tem uma capacidade de, se a Europa tiver visão, é nesse sentido, se a Europa tiver visão, é com a África que estabelece uma parceria. Só que as parcerias dos europeus com os africanos, de uma vez por todas, tirem qualquer condescendência dessas parcerias. Ou sobranceria, ou de que sabemos mais, ou de que... Não, senhor, isto são parcerias entre Estados soberanos, são parcerias em que nós temos que transferir tecnologia, em que nós temos que somar capital, temos que, como foi aqui dito, é incrível o caminho que a África tem que fazer na digitalização, mas há bons exemplos de digitalização em África. E, portanto, se uns fazem, é porque é possível. E este acordo... e, portanto, todo o mundo, eu costumo dizer, os ministros dos estrangeiros, hoje em dia, voam todos para os mesmos sítios. Baku, Azerbaijão. Argélia. Maputo, Moçambique. Luanda, Angola. Os ministros estrangeiros, os aviões estão crowded de ministros estrangeiros ocidentais a tentarem fazer contratos, ou de gás, ou de petróleo. É a situação em que a Europa foi apanhada. Se quiser aprender a lição, aprende. Se não quiser aprender a lição, não aprende.
Então, Paulo, diga-me,
Pronto.
gostaria de questionar neste sentido. A Europa precisa das matérias-primas da África. É a África, mas a África precisa de uma parceria mais rica, de um ponto de vista de receber tecnologia para ela própria se desenvolver. Como vê este binómio? Mr. Oramat, yes.
Yeah, my understanding, the interpreter was breaking the equipment. So that Europe needs raw materials and Africa needs technology to develop. I don't think these are inconsistent. I think Excellency Mr. Potage used the right word, just like Vivian. First, Vivian says, don't generalize. Mr. Potage says, you need to have a relationship that recognizes that we need each other. Let me tell you the biggest problem we have in the relationship. It's a relationship that starts by telling Africa we have aid, we have grants. And then the aid and the grants do not come as a fact. I'll give you an example. During the COVID-19 pandemic, if not for the maybe demographics and the fact that the African CDC and the African Union made a decision quite early and many countries shut down, it would have been a disaster in Africa. Nobody went to look for vaccines because we were told that the COVAX facility was bringing vaccines to give us as a gift. It was only in October 2020 that it dawned on us as a people that there was no vaccines coming. Because you enter an arrangement, a supposedly multilateral arrangement, to do the vaccines, to give Africa some vaccines. As soon as you entered it, you went and did bilateral deals. So that when we then decided to buy vaccines, Afrexim Bank put up $2 billion to buy the vaccines. We couldn't even see the vaccines to buy anymore. It became a struggle. It was only because we had a facility for fill and finish in South Africa, which was manufacturing and shipping to Europe, whereas we had nothing in Africa. It was because we had that we were able to negotiate with the European Union Commission to share that. That was how we were able to enter the deal we entered with Johnson & Johnson. So why did I give this example? It would have been better to say, we're not giving you any vaccines until we finish vaccinating our people. So Africa will go and look for the vaccines themselves. So the relationship we're supposed to have is a relationship that will be based on economics, that we need each other. And as Mr. Potential, it's not a condescending relationship. The reason Africa has gone through this trade agreement is also to have a strong bargaining power as a people, to build regional value chains, to make it more attractive for investors to come to Africa. You see, now the opportunity is there. If Europeans do not come, the Chinese will come.
Exactly.
And in a few years, you will say the Chinese have dominated the supply chain. Of course, we don't want it. We want Africans to dominate the supply chain. But the reality is there are needs. The market is a market is of about 1.2 billion people. Before you know it will be it will go 2 billion people. The needs, everything is in scarce supply. What we need, the Europe and Africa should have the best of relationships because Europe understands Africa. The history goes, decades, for centuries. So Africa, nobody should understand Africa outside Africa more than Europe. But the idea, the relationship has to be a relationship that understands that Africa wants economic development also. Because we can have that symbiotic arrangement, a symbiotic arrangement that reduces illegal migration, that creates an opportunity for markets for European goods, that also creates an opportunity for technology transfer to Africans. And we build one market that one day, who knows, you sign that free agreement, that the two markets will come together. So you then exploit the very youthful population that we have on the continent of Africa. That's no reason. Nobody likes another people's country more than their own. Everybody likes his or her home. It's a situation that makes people to want to go away. If things are better for everybody, people will not come going around. I prefer to be in my home. So I think that relationship is what Europe has to find. It shouldn't be a relationship that is one-sided, or it shouldn't be a relationship that takes Africa as a footnote, because things are happening, let's help them. Or we need energy, let's go to Africa and take it. When things are okay, we forget about it.
Yeah.
Because it will come to haunt you. Yes, thank you.
Muito obrigada. Viviane, deixe-me colocar-lhe a difficult question, que é assim. É verdade que a Europa entende a África melhor que ninguém, pelo menos em termos históricos, é verdade. Mas há muitos africanos que demandam a Europa em processos migratórios e é verdade que a Europa precisa dos imigrantes africanos, mas todavia deixa perecer muitos deles no Mediterrâneo. Isto é muito... é uma relação desigual, porque os africanos também precisam de fixar a sua população jovem para poder desenvolver-se e ganhar capacidades e competências. Neste sentido, como é que as pessoas em África veem esta relação difícil com a Europa também, que é a recusa, por exemplo, das migrações ou os acordos, os estranhos acordos que são feitos com alguns Estados para que impeçam que haja rotas migratórias para a Europa, etc. Como é que vê esta relação neste aspecto?
Thank you for the difficult question. I think it takes me back to what Professor Rama just said, right? Nobody wants to leave their country. Nobody wants to leave their home. It's the situations on the ground that sometimes push us to want to travel greater miles for better pastures. So your question is one diplomatic, and then one, I think it's more about having open conversations between both continents, right? Africa has a youth bulge that needs to be harnessed. And if that is not realized, it can become a liability. And also given the statistics that the Foreign Affairs Minister shared, in the future, Africa is going to have the human capital that Europe needs. So I think for me, it's upon both continents and the leaders to really come to the table, first of all, to realize the challenges that both continents could face as a result of the youth bulge and as a result of not having clear diplomatic relationships around tackling the migration of young people, sometimes illegally, through the Mediterranean into the European countries in search of greener pastures. But also it's an opportunity for us to figure out as African nations how to first have the political stability for our economies to thrive, and also how to create opportunities that are inclusive for the young people so that they can be able to thrive in their country without risking their lives crossing the Mediterranean Sea. So back to your question, that again is difficult. It's us supporting African economies to realize their full potential and make sure that the economies are inclusive. But also, right now, the biggest challenge is because of the COVID-19 pandemic, so many people lost their jobs. And also, we have countries that have political instabilities, making it difficult for even those who are educated and skilled to have decent lives. So it's not always that the people who are crossing, coming to Europe, are not the smartest, not the skilled, not the educated. Majority of them are educated and skilled and really aware, but they're risking their lives because they want greener pastures. So we need to work with the continent to ensure that our economies thrive. We also need to ensure that we open the spaces for entrepreneurs, support them so that they can thrive on the continent. And I think that's where the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement comes in, creating that free movement of people from one country to another. Because sometimes it's actually easier to move from Africa to Europe than to move from one African country to the next African country. So that free movement of people, free movement of goods could also help us curb this illegal immigration of young people to Europe.
I think I can just say something, add something to what she said, if you allow me one minute.
Diga.
You see, some of these things can also be done actually even better by the business sector, not even the government. I'll give you an example. We have a program we are running today with the Association of Young Entrepreneurs in Porto, supported by the city of Porto. You know, we have a huge youth population, as you know, and the creative industry in Africa is booming. Mm-hmm. So they need access to markets. Mm-hmm. They need skills. They needed exposure. So that partnership we got from the young entrepreneurs working with the city of Porto, we as a bank, we come together to bring about 40 twice a year, African designers to the Portugal fashion. We've done it now consecutively for 2 years. And this year, the Paris fashion came there and entered an agreement with it so that the same thing will happen in Paris. These people we're bringing there have, I think about 5 of them or 6 of them, have entered big contracts. I just use it, it looks small, but these things are the things that will have multiplier effect. Because what we've now agreed with the Textile Manufacturing Association in the Porto area is to look at how to do a supply chain in Africa for the small entrepreneurs there to form a cooperative, and they can then help take fabric from the Porto area, and they then produce some of the garments they take back to the market. This is what will change the situation and the narrative. Those people that have been given this opportunity will not migrate here to live here. They will do this in Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
Que é uma ótima ideia. Paulo, esta parceria, tal como ela está atualmente, são parcerias desiguais, não é? O exemplo da COVAX e o exemplo das vacinas, citado pelo professor Benedict Horamá, é particularmente duro. O que é que a Europa pode mudar também para deixar de ver só o imediato?
A única coisa nisso que repeti. Primeiro, eu tenho a mesma esperança enorme no acordo de comércio continental da África, porque só para as pessoas terem noção, a África tem o valor do intracomércio africano é 15%. A média na Europa, ou na Ásia, ou nas Américas é acima sempre de 50%. Portanto, o comércio entre países africanos e a circulação entre países africanos pode ser infinitamente melhorada. E eu tenho muita admiração. e até vou dizer aqui o nome do presidente que eu acho que deu o impulso final ao Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, que foi Paul Kagame do Ruanda. Foi quem deu o impulso final. E pronto, provavelmente é um líder muito criticado na Europa e muito apreciado em África, devo dizer. É bom que a gente tenha a noção que o Ruanda teve um genocídio há 30 anos. E hoje em dia tem uma das melhores taxas de crescimento económico constantes, incluindo em 2022.
E de feminização.
É incrível, é incrível. A base de partida era tão difícil, mas pronto. Agora, o meu ponto é a Europa tem... Nós, obviamente, precisamos de gerir as migrações e elas só podem ser geridas com a contraparte. Não há gestão possível e eficaz. Por exemplo, a coisa mais evidente, que essa toda a gente entende, não é possível gerir os fluxos migratórios que usam Marrocos como plataforma, mas que não são necessariamente massivamente de marroquinos, são de pessoas subsaarianas que estão em Marrocos como plataforma, como aqueles que vêm da América Central usam o México como plataforma para chegar aos Estados Unidos. Só é possível gerir com equilíbrio os fluxos migratórios com a parceria entre o lado europeu e o lado africano, no caso, entre os países, entre Espanha e Marrocos, entre Itália e Líbia, Bom, e a União Europeia tem que dar o enquadramento dessa parceria. O segundo ponto é que nós somos não misturem, se nós conseguirmos separar mentalmente questões que são culturais e que de questões que são económicas, nós somos um continente a envelhecer dramaticamente. Eu diria mesmo que o nosso maior problema a prazo é um problema de inovarmos pouco e envelhecermos muito. Se calhar há alguma relação entre as duas coisas.
Temos que terminar.
Bom, mas nós precisamos, de uma forma transparente, eu tenho muita vergonha com toda a franqueza, tenho muita vergonha daquela imagem de 2015 de países que não receberam um único imigrante de lado nenhum, como se isso fosse um troféu, uma coisa que se exiba. E quando ouço certas coisas, eu gostava de saber o que era, gostava de saber como era a restauração, ou a construção, ou as colheitas sem imigração. Gostava de saber. Como eu não quero que a economia pare, nem perco tempo a discutir o assunto, ok? Bom, mas, portanto, gostava só de dizer isto. O approach tem que ser muito mais, o meu único ponto tem que ser uma visão, a China tem uma aproximação económica à África, a Rússia tem uma aproximação militar à África, os Estados Unidos já tiveram muita presença em África e já desapareceram da África e já voltaram à África, mas uma coisa é o Estado dos Estados Unidos, outra coisa são as empresas privadas americanas que têm muita força em África, e a Europa, eu acho que pode ter desde que não seja sobranceira e não queira dar lições, a Europa é muito manienta nessas coisas, é se não nos conhecemos.
Paulo Portas, a conversa está muito boa, mas...
E temos que acabar. O meu único ponto é mantenham uma estratégia europeia para a África que não se esgote no curto prazo. Ser constante.
Sim.
Ser constante. Ser constante. Demora tempo a fazer o progresso.
Muito obrigada.